Remember when Samsung used to use the MicroSD card slot as an upper hand ace against Apple? There was literally a Samsung commercial where they mocked iPhone users as wall huggers. People chained to power outlets because their phone had no flexibility, no options, no expandable storage. And the MicroSD card was the crown jewel of that argument. It was Samsung's way of saying, we respect you enough to give you a choice. So here's the strange part. In 2015, Samsung launched the Galaxy S6 and quietly removed the MicroSD slot entirely. Gone. No announcement, no apology. Just a premium glass and metal phone that looked suspiciously like the device Samsung had spent years mocking. The internet exploded. Forums lit up. Fans who had sworn they'd never touch an iPhone suddenly said maybe. And Samsung lost tens of millions of dollars in sales they had projected with confidence. But here's the part that nobody talks about. Samsung listened. Within 1 year, the MicroSD slot came back in the Galaxy S7. And Samsung's head of technology admitted publicly it had been one of the most positive reactions they'd ever received from customers. So why, just 5 years later in 2021, did Samsung quietly remove it again? By the end of this video, you're going to understand the full story, every decision, every reversal, and the uncomfortable truth about why that little slot disappeared for good and what it's actually costing you every time you upgrade your Galaxy S today. To understand what happened, you have to go back to where it started. The original Samsung Galaxy S launched in 2010, and right out of the box, it came with a MicroSD slot as a given. Nobody celebrated it. It was just there, the way a steering wheel is just in a car. You expected it. Back then, smartphones shipped with embarrassingly small internal storage. We're talking 8 or 16 gigabytes on a good day. The MicroSD card wasn't a bonus, it was a necessity. Without it, your phone filled up in weeks. Photos, videos, music, apps. The slot was the only reason any of it was manageable. So through the S2, S3, S4, and S5, the MicroSD slot stayed. Each year, Samsung's flagship got faster, sharper, and more powerful. And every year, that little tray slot was just quietly there, doing its job. But by 2014, Samsung had a problem. And it wasn't a storage problem. Samsung's sales were declining, not collapsing, but softening in a way that worried executives. The Galaxy S5 had sold well, but felt uninspired. Reviews called it plasticky, derivative, a phone that played it safe. Meanwhile, Apple was building momentum with the iPhone 6, and for the first time, it offered a larger screen, the single biggest advantage Android had always held over iOS. Samsung was losing ground on design, and they knew it. So for the Galaxy S6 in 2015, they made a decision. Go all in on premium. Metal frame, glass back, no removable battery, and no MicroSD slot. Samsung's VP of Product Strategy, Justin Dennison, stood on stage at the Galaxy S6 Unpacked keynote and explained the battery decision with a phrase about consumer confidence in charging. But the MicroSD removal? The official line from Samsung's head of technology, Kyle Brown, was about performance. He said the new UFS 2.0 internal storage was so fast that a MicroSD slot would have acted as a bottleneck, slowing the overall system down. That explanation had some technical merit. MicroSD cards at the time were genuinely slower than the premium internal storage Samsung was using. But here's the thing that made people furious. Other Android manufacturers managed to include MicroSD slots in their flagship phones that same year. LG did it, Sony did it, so the performance argument had a ceiling, and customers could see right through it. The real story, in the eyes of millions of Galaxy fans, was simpler and more cynical. Samsung was copying Apple. The reaction was immediate. Reddit threads with thousands of replies, Android Central forums burning for weeks, tech journalists writing pieces with titles asking whether Samsung had forgotten who its customers were, and on Twitter, the quote that captured the whole mood perfectly. Why did Samsung change the removable battery and MicroSD on the S6? It's the one thing the iPhone doesn't have that they like to brag about. Samsung had projected 70 million Galaxy S6 units sold in 2015. They had reportedly taken 20 million pre-orders. The phone received genuinely great reviews. Fast, beautiful, the best-built Galaxy ever made. And sales still fell dramatically short of target. Now, to be fair, global market headwinds played a role. Apple was surging. Supply for the popular S6 Edge model couldn't keep up with demand early on, multiple factors. But Samsung's own engineers would later admit in interviews that the removal of the MicroSD slot and the removable battery was a significant driver of the shortfall. Fans who had stored years of photos on a 128GB card they'd carried from phone to phone had no upgrade path. The S6 didn't just lose a feature, it broke a promise. And that's a different kind of loss. Here's where it gets interesting. Because what Samsung did next is actually the most underrated thing they've ever done as a company. They actually listened. In February 2016, Samsung announced the Galaxy S7, and buried in the spec sheet, beneath the headline camera upgrades and the new dual-pixel autofocus, there it was, MicroSD slot, back, IP68 water resistance, also back. Kyle Brown gave an interview to TechRadar around that time, and he said something remarkable. A lot of people were very disappointed we didn't have a slot in the S6, and its return has been one of the most positive reactions to the S7. We're really proud of what we managed to achieve. That's a company publicly admitting it got something wrong and correcting course. That almost never happens at that scale. The S7 went on to sell 55 million units, significantly outperforming the S6. Samsung fans came back. The brand rebuilt trust, and through the S8, S9, S10, and S20, across 5 straight years of flagships, the microSD slot stayed, reliable as ever. But something was changing underneath the surface, and this is the part of the story most people missed. Between 2016 and 2021, 3 things happened simultaneously that reframed the entire microSD conversation. First, internal storage got cheap and massive. The Galaxy S10 launched with a base storage of 128 gigabytes. The S20 started at 128 gigs too. The storage crisis of 2010, where you needed a microSD card just to function, had quietly disappeared. Most users were barely filling half their internal storage, let alone needing to expand it. Second, 5G and cloud changed user behavior. Streaming replaced storing. Instead of loading 200 songs onto a card and carrying them around, people streamed. Instead of saving movies locally for flights, people downloaded them temporarily. Samsung Cloud, Google Photos, and YouTube Music had fundamentally changed why anyone reached for that little slot in the first place. Third, and this is the uncomfortable one, Samsung became a chip company, not just a phone company. Samsung is one of the largest memory chip manufacturers in the world. They make the UFS storage inside your Galaxy. They make the DRAM. And they also, somewhat ironically, manufacture microSD cards themselves. But here's the math. If you buy a Galaxy S flagship with 256 gigabytes of internal storage, Samsung makes money on the chip inside and on the phone. If you buy a 128 gigabyte Galaxy and expand it with a $30 microSD card, Samsung makes money on the card, but far less per device than they would have made selling you the 256 gigabyte version. And when Samsung charges $200 to upgrade from 256 gigabytes to 512 gigabytes internally, and you can buy a 512 gigabyte microSD card for a fraction of that, the math for Samsung gets very uncomfortable very fast. This is the detail that turns the whole story on its head. In January 2021, Samsung unveiled the Galaxy S21. And once again, the microSD slot was gone. This time, the announcement landed differently. It wasn't the explosive backlash of 2015. It was quieter, more resigned, a collective sigh from the community rather than a revolt. Part of that was timing. 2021 was still deep in the pandemic, and the S21 launched at a lower starting price than its predecessor, which softened the blow. Part of it was that phones were shipping with 128 gigabytes minimum, so the immediate pain was less acute. But part of it was something else, something your competitors never say out loud. Samsung had learned from 2015 not just how to remove the feature, but how to remove it in a way that wouldn't burn the house down. Lower the base price, add legitimately excellent cameras, ship it with strong 5G, give people something to celebrate so they're not counting what's missing, and it worked. The S21, S22, S23, S24, and S25 have all shipped without the microSD slot, and Samsung has remained the world's largest smartphone manufacturer throughout. Alright, here's where it hits you personally. Right now, in 2025, Samsung charges you $200 to go from 256 gigabytes to 512 gigabytes on the Galaxy S25 Ultra. For an extra $300 on top of that, you get 1 terabyte. If the microSD slot existed, you could buy a 512 gigabyte card for roughly $40 to $50, a 1 terabyte card for around $80 to $100. The difference between what Samsung charges for storage upgrades and what expandable storage actually costs in the market is not a rounding error. It is a deliberate structural margin built into the flagship pricing model. And here's the thing that makes this even more pointed. The budget Galaxy A series still comes with a microSD slot, the A55, the A35. Cheaper phones with smaller batteries and slower processors. They kept the slot that the $1,200 flagship removed. Think about that for a second. The feature that Samsung said was too slow, too compromising, too much of a performance bottleneck, is sitting comfortably inside phones that cost a third of the price. The A series customer and the S series customer both want expandable storage. Only one of them gets it, and it's not the one paying more. Here's the question everyone's been asking since the S21, and it's becoming more relevant, not less. A new standard called MicroSD Express has emerged. It uses a PCIe interface, the same type of connection used in computer SSDs, and delivers sequential read speeds of up to 800 megabytes per second. Some specs on the horizon push toward 2,000 megabytes per second. For context, traditional microSD cards top out around 100 to 200 megabytes per second. The speed gap that Samsung cited as the reason for removal in 2015 is closing fast. And who manufactures microSD Express cards? Samsung does. They make the P9 Express series right now. They have the engineering expertise, the production capacity, and the manufacturing infrastructure to implement this in a Galaxy S flagship with zero outsourcing. The technical argument for keeping the slot out is getting weaker with every product cycle. But the financial argument for keeping it out has never been stronger, because with every passing year, more customers accept the new normal, more people default to cloud storage, and the upgrade tax becomes just another line item in the Galaxy purchase experience. Samsung reversed course once, in 2016, because the backlash was loud enough and fast enough to make the S6 a cautionary tale internally. Whether the S21 era eventually gets its own correction, whether the S27, S28, or some future Galaxy brings back the slot, depends on one thing. Whether that changes is up to you. But before you go, I want to hear from you. Were you a Galaxy S owner when Samsung pulled the microSD slot? Did it actually push you toward a different phone? Or did you shrug and upgrade anyway? Maybe you've got a drawer full of old microSD cards that are completely useless to you now, or maybe you genuinely haven't missed it once. Whatever your experience is, drop it down in the comments. Because honestly, the comments on this one are going to be interesting. Samsung fans have a lot of feelings about this topic, and I want to read every single one. If you enjoyed this video, you're going to want to check out this one next, about why Apple gets Samsung's best screens before Samsung's own customers do. It's the same pattern, a completely different story, and it will genuinely change the way you think about what's inside your Galaxy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.